to stop a driver from being charged with murder. The man known as Abraham reportedly tried to stop a stabbing in West London by driving into the attacker. He was arrested and has been released on bail while police continue their investigation. The driver's lawyer, Mohammed Akunji, told GB News his client's actions go beyond everyday bravery.
Well, it makes him a person who was acting fully in accordance with the law, which was in the self-defence of another, in fact, others. And we say that's quite squarely and quite obviously a person who's a hero, who's put himself in between harm's way, somebody who is effecting a savage attack on people. And he put himself between that person and innocent people.
An antiviral pill for those most at risk of serious COVID infection will be rolled out across the NHS next month. The government has announced the UK's second antiviral tablet, known as Paxlovid, will be made available to thousands of people with weakened immune systems from mid-February. Studies suggest the drug made by Pfizer can cut the risk of hospital admission or death by 88% if given in the first 5 days of symptoms. The government's pledging to make British Sign Language a recognised language. It's hoped a new bill will improve access for deaf people and promote its use during public announcements. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
Welcome back. It's On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up today, Plan B restrictions are being lifted, but will the working from home revolution carry on regardless? With ministers poised to change tax rules to discourage home working, we examine new research that shows working from home is what much of the public wants. We're talking Russia-Ukraine here on The Money, not just the military and geopolitical tensions, but the possible impact of this East-West standoff on the cost of living here in Britain. We'll be heading to Cardiff as COVID restrictions are eased in Wales for an update on the HGV driver crisis. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Well, today we're talking to Dr. Majid Al-Sadi, a British Iraqi-born entrepreneur and philanthropist with a vision for the West Midlands and the UK as a whole that involves much more trade with the Middle East. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, suggestions. Whether you're watching on GB News TV or listening on DAB GB News Radio, what do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they affect you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. You're On the Money. Now, this COVID pandemic has, of course, seen much more working from home. For those with jobs not in sectors like manufacturing, hospitality and transport, say, that involve hands-on labour, as well as health and care workers, of course, who clearly can't work from home. For millions of us, though, as broadband connectivity improves and firms become more flexible, working from home is clearly possible. And new research shows the extent to which the public mood has shifted. A survey by the consultancy EQ Lab suggests that no less than 68% of Brits want to work from home, despite the government urging us to return to the office as Plan B restrictions come to an end. That figure in favour of working from home rises to 81% for 25 to 34-year-olds. But is working from home as productive as the office? It may be convenient, but being with colleagues in person can be useful, even essential, especially in creative industries. For many, the social interaction of work, the camaraderie, the banter, the sense of shared purpose is also an important part of life. And what can firms do if they want staff to come back in? Now, the Treasury may soon close a tax loophole that encourages home working, a loophole that's cost the public purse nearly £500 million since lockdown began. Officials are urgently reviewing a rule that allows anyone who works from home, even for a single day, to claim a yearly sum of up to £125 in tax relief. Now, it's clear that while ministers recognise that as we come out of this pandemic, A mix of home working and office working, the so-called hybrid model, is the future. At the same time, though, the government wants most of us, most of the time, to get the economy moving again by going back physically to work. So, as Plan B restrictions are lifted, that's today's On the Money question. Is the working from home revolution here to stay? You're on the money. So you have grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do on this show. And joining me now to tell us more about the findings of that research I mentioned, what the future of work may hold for us, is Richard Clayton. He's from the consultancy EQ Lab, and our regular panellist, friend of the show, Vicky Price. She's Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. She's in the studio. Vicky, great to see you, as always. Richard, thank you for joining me here on The Money. We're delighted to highlight this research that EQ Lab has done. It seems very, very well timed as these restrictions are lifted. What do you think the future is when it comes to working from home?
So I think the future is going to include working from home and working from the office. And I think we've learned a huge amount in the last 2 years about what kind of work works better at home and undoubtedly what doesn't. So I think sort of progressive organisations are going to really come to terms with how they can organise their workforce, when they could be working from home and when they should be in the office. So I don't think it's going to be, I'm going to work from home always. It's going to be this hybrid kind of environment. But I do think there's going to be some age demographic differences. So it's very clear that younger demographics want to work from home more regularly than older demographics. So they're going to have to be sort of looked after, taken care of. Because if you start making them come back into the office all the time, or even more than that they're comfortable with, there's a real chance that you're going to fail to get the next generation of talent. So there's going to be some kind of balance required.
There clearly is a demographic divide, as suggested by your research. Richard, you're joining us from Hong Kong. Obviously, in Hong Kong, apartments are often quite small, very expensive. It's kind of a microcosm of the situation here. Often young people in particular are living in cramped accommodation, often can't afford to buy their own place. That does make working from home more difficult. But you would still say that given the experience of the pandemic, given that a lot of the sort of executive class, if you like, are relaxing the idea, they understand that working from home can be quite useful. Do you really think it's never going to be the same again in terms of office life?
So I think in your intro, you were very clear that a certain type of work is going to be better in the office, where you need the sense of purpose, where you need the collaboration, where you need the creativity. And I think you're very correct there. I think that is going to be central to overall organisational performance going forward. But what we've seen, and this is not just in the UK, I mean, this is globally, what we've seen is people working from home feeling they have the opportunity to sort of sit and focus in a way perhaps they don't do in the current workplace, especially workplaces with these open plan designs where people are moving backwards and forwards, interrupting them. There's disruption, there's noise, there's all kinds of movement. So they don't feel they can concentrate as well in the workplace as they perhaps do at home. So you might see work being split into two different types. The sort of the individual productivity, where people will sit at home in front of the computer for 3 or 4 hours and distraction-free environments. And I think you're finding in the research, it doesn't matter how big people's houses are, they've been quite capable of doing that, versus when you need to come in and get that kind of high energy collaboration going, solve some complex problems, then you're going to see people come back into the offices, and you might see a degree of office redesign as well. You might actually see workplaces moving away from this open plan kind of area and start really investing in high-end collaborative spaces.
Very interesting. Vicky, let's turn to you. You used to be at the top of the government economic service, you know, the most important economist in Whitehall, as it were. You'll know that for the government, this is kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, if people work from home more, it will ease pressure on our transport system. It may mean, our housing crisis isn't so bad because people can live further away from where they physically work. On the other hand, you lose that buzz of vibrant city centres, the coffee bars, the dry cleaners, the hospitality industry and so on. Where do you think government thinking is at the moment when it comes to this emergence of a hybrid model that Rich has just mentioned?
What we've seen is that they've already been encouraging the civil servants to come back, saying they should really start working from the office, a lot more than perhaps people had expected was going to be the case, because they believe that that's going to encourage others and it will help the recovery. But there are so many aspects of this that one needs to watch. I mean, the first thing is, is productivity really improving if you're staying at home? And the evidence is so far that it is, but what people really want is flexibility. That is what improves hugely your performance, is if you're able to do things in a slightly different way, you're not confined to 9 to 5. The second thing is you mentioned transport. I mean, the truth is, of course, look at the problems with TfL, Transport for London, but also all the other
local authority-based transport companies.
And not just the local authority ones, but also the intercity ones, for example, where the government has had to intervene because the numbers of passengers have gone down.
They've been running empty trains for 2 years.
And, of course, we've all been bailing them out. So from that point of view, there is an advantage in going back and at least making sure that people are paying something for those trains that will still be going up and down up to a point. But we've seen already, of course, reductions in those schedules. So that's a drain on the economy in itself, which is an issue. And the other one, finally, I think, which is an interesting one about the young versus the old. And you mentioned Hong Kong and what happens there, which I think is very relevant. Because if you look at London, yes, if you look across the UK and across the world, possibly the 25 to 34-year-olds, whatever, 24 to 35-year-olds, are less keen to be going back because they can now do work in a different way. They've rethought work, they've rethought their entire life, I think, which might be shaped in a different way from here on. But what you find in London is that the younger generation is among those who are most keen to go back because they're suffering exactly
in
from
cramped
those
accommodation,
problems.
really expensive.
And
so for them,
loneliness.
work is like
Life.
It's a better place to be than at home, obviously, because of the living conditions.
Absolutely. So there are differences. There are regional differences and there are cities to rural differences. But of course, if you can work more flexibly with all the IT equipment that's there, it encourages more people to participate, possibly including women and so on.
Yeah.
What you also find in London is that men seem to be more willing to go back than women, which will be interesting because, that might affect the sort of career trajectory of women in the future. So that's one to watch.
It's very interesting, Richard, and I should say I think your research from EQ Lab, you've really put your finger on something, which is why we're delighted to showcase that research today. And I know the work that you've been doing with colleagues, it isn't just about the economics of this, it's also about the cultural implications of this, the logistic implications and so on, the societal implications.
Yeah, and I think it's very the word flexible is very, very important. So even prior to COVID, the idea that work from home it was effective, it needed flexibility. When you're working from home, you don't want to be sitting in front of a computer being with all your keystrokes being mapped, being watched by your employer. You have to be able to have the flexibility to plan your day, to be able to go and do the kind of things that working from home is advantageous for. And so there's that kind of learning, I think, that a lot of organisations have grabbed hold of. And the question is, how is that going to impact society and organisational cultures, I think, going forward? So, yes, one of the things that younger people don't seem to want to have to do is to go and commute for an hour long or so when they go into the city, come home at 8, 9 o'clock, but there's another commute back, then go and do the shopping, and they're absolutely shattered. And then, of course, when they're shattered, well-being becomes a bit of a problem. They don't concentrate as well. So you've got those kind of productivity challenges, and I think it's very clear that productivity goes up when flexibility is a part of the work from home experience. But as Vicky said, we can't have cities where people aren't coming in the whole time. So how do you get that balance right? And I think the complexity of work is going to go up. Leaders and managers are going to have to start working out where productivity happens well, where collaboration happens well. How do you support the well-being of the people and the kind of work that they want and their individualized behaviors? And how do you keep on contributing to the economy of the cities to keep the UK going? And then that's exactly the same as Hong Kong. How do you get people into the high-end areas rather than just having them out in their small apartments? So I think it's a global phenomenon.
Vicky, you've combined a very successful career with being a mum and family and all the rest of it. With all due respect, how much easier would your life have been when you started out if working from home was as possible then as it is now?
Well, I'll answer that very briefly. Hugely, I have to say.
Vicky Price, thank you as ever. Friend of the show. And Richard Clayton of EQ Lab. Thanks to my guests for that discussion. It's 1:19. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, Mark White, GB News Home Affairs and Security Editor, will be joining me to discuss how the Russia-Ukraine crisis impacts us in terms of the British cost of living. Right here. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello again. It's been a pretty quiet January so far, but our weather is set to turn more unsettled as we head through this weekend. Through Friday, still got some sunshine around, but those skies clouding over and those winds turning stronger. And that's because this high pressure slides away and we see these tightening isobars starting to push their way in. So a wetter and windier picture of weather to come as we go through the next couple of days. Out there at the moment, though, we've got plenty of sunshine across eastern areas. The sky is turning a little bit hazy through the afternoon as we see that cloud pushing in from the west. But elsewhere, rather cloudy through much of the afternoon with some outbreaks of rain pushing in across the west of Scotland. The wind's beginning to pick up here, and that's a sign of things to come. Temperatures on the mild side, though, 11s and 12s under the cloud, 9 or 10 where we've got sunnier skies and some sunshine around through much of the day. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, skies turn cloudy for most places, some drizzly bits of pieces of rain in western areas, but that wet weather and windier weather becomes more dominant across Scotland. So we are going to see some pretty gusty conditions, a wind warning in force across Scotland. We'll see some pretty squally gales to push their way through with that heavy rain, but it does stay mild overnight. As we go into Saturday, then, that's when the winds really start to ramp up. We'll see some very gusty conditions for western Scotland through the central belt over towards eastern Scotland as well. Could be some damaging gusts of winds here. Stay tuned to the latest forecast. This weather front drives its way southwards. We'll see brighter and blustery conditions following in behind some wintry showers over higher ground and feeling quite cool with those strong and gusty winds, even though temperatures may get to 13 across the far south. That cloud and rain eventually clears the far southwest of Cornwall as we go through the early hours, and then clearer skies following on behind means that as those winds ease, we will see a touch of frost into Sunday. But the weather is set to turn yet more unsettled again on Sunday with another deep area of low pressure pushing in. Bye-bye for now.
Light up your winter nights with Mood Magic LED lights from JML. With 13 ambient colours to choose from and hundreds of colour combinations. Go from bright and fun to a relaxing glow at the press of a button. Simply peel and place. The adhesive pad sticks to virtually any surface. There are 4 lights in a pack and a remote control. Illuminate your home and set the mood that suits yours with Mood Magic from JML. Only $19.99 from Asda, Dunelm, Robert Dias and Wilko.
Sorry, how do I invest?
With confidence. It's not about how, it's about who with. Choose those who help you see future horizons, who keep you calm in troubled waters, and are always behind you, whatever you see. This is the secret.
Money Farm. Invest in your inner peace.
Curtains. The end of the road. Kicking the bucket. Popping your clogs. Croaking it. No one likes to talk about death. But when it comes to planning a funeral, for yourself or for a loved one, we can help get the best deal for you. With packages starting from just £999, you can compare and find your best options for free at funeralplanmarket.com. So you're not stressed out when you're checking out. Visit funeralplanmarket.com today to find out more.
Discover the finest quality made-to-measure window dressings delivered direct to your door. Shop now for an extra 20% off at blindsdirect.co.uk.
My word, Money Super 7, that was a close one. But you two were in and out of there in no time. And you saved Sarah an impressive £327 on a new credit card.
The Money Super 7, helping Britain save on credit cards and so much more. Super Save with Money Supermarket.
Welcome back. It's just turned 1:24. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, the threat of escalating conflict between Ukraine and Russia has been rattling global stock markets for some weeks now, with shares listed in London, New York and elsewhere experiencing significant turbulence. Geopolitical tensions have also impacted oil markets, with crude hitting $90 a barrel this week for the first time since 2014. But the economic implications of this standoff on the border of Russia and eastern Ukraine go wider. And were the West to introduce more punitive sanctions on Russia, that could be felt here too. To discuss this and get an update on the UK government's thinking of this ongoing crisis, I'm joined here by GBNews Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White. Great to see you, Mark. Just give us a sense of where the British government is thinking at the moment. Obviously, tensions are escalating.
Yeah, I mean, they are still of the view, as is America. In fact, the US President Joe Biden has been saying in recent hours that he still believes that there will be some kind of military action undertaken by the Russians. Next month he's talking now, but of course next month is, just a few days away. So no time scale given. But of course, we've had the US, we've had the UK, we've had NATO warning us for weeks now that within days we could see Russian military action. The Russians have denied this throughout. They say they've been on manoeuvres. They are not planning to invade Ukraine. And of course, so far, well, they've been proved right. They haven't as yet. But that doesn't stop those in government in Western countries in particular, as I say, the UK and the US, and the strategists believing that at some point there may be some kind of military move.
Now, understandably, the British, the Americans will want to put up a show of force. They don't want to be pushed around by Russia. Equally, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has just said, he doesn't want Russia to implement any kind of military action, but he doesn't want Russia to be ignored either. So obviously there's going to be this ongoing tension. There are already sanctions on Russia by the West. If those sanctions tighten, though, is that part of the British government's thinking too, given that you've now got oil at $90 a barrel, of course, we've got high wholesale gas prices, Russia is a major exporter of both oil and gas. So are we seeing the cost of living crisis and our foreign policy thinking being slightly blurred?
Yeah, I mean, and that is the stick, of course, that the West has in terms of trying to turn the screw on the Russian government, trying to divert them away from anything that could be construed as any kind of military action on that border. And we have seen, obviously, the dialogue continuing, which is a positive thing. Again, today, Macron was talking on this issue, as the German Chancellor has been. The various parties are there. Sergei Lavrov saying that there are some grains within what is being proposed by the US that are worth exploring, but are very, very loose. Sort of acceptance of some of the minor points within what the US have been suggesting as a way forward. It still doesn't answer the huge main issues as far as Russia is concerned, which is the continued eastward expansion, as they see it, of NATO. And they will point to the fact that, of course, there are 14 countries, the former Eastern Bloc countries, that have joined NATO since 1997, and they are absolutely adamant and determined that Ukraine will not join that list. That is, they say, an existential threat to the Russian people if Ukraine was to become a NATO member. So they're pushing back on that. The US say, of course, the West in general, NATO countries say that's just not achievable. If Ukraine wants to join NATO, that's up to Ukraine as a sovereign nation to be able to do that. And the other issue, of course, is the issue around the basing of missiles as well.
Of course. Now, obviously, there's a lot of focus on those geopolitical tensions, on the choreography, if you like, of who's in NATO and who's not in NATO, given a hugely important treaty. Yeah. If a NATO country is attacked, of course, NATO members are compelled to respond. So this is very high stakes, and we're right to be focusing on it. I think what's also happening, though, Mark, is within government, within the military and political establishment, eyes are now on the impact of this on financial markets, but also on the market for commodities. We've mentioned oil and gas. Also food, because the Black Sea, Ukraine, Odessa, that really is a grain funnel. You've got Russia is the world's biggest exporter of wheat. Ukraine's the world's third biggest exporter of corn. A lot of these commodities, these basic foodstuffs come out of Central Asia through the Black Sea, through the Dardanelles to the Med and the outside world. So do you think that will be at least part of the thinking of the Western political establishment?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's the last thing that any of the players in this current, at the moment, this geopolitical conflict in terms of the rhetoric so far, not militarily, but if it goes in that direction, there is real concern, as you say, because of the fact that Ukraine especially, it has been known for centuries as the breadbasket of Europe, and for good reason. It is home to a quarter of the world's highly fertile soil, known as black soil.
The black earth, that's right.
Yeah, which is ideal, of course, for crop growing. You mentioned, of course, Russia being a massive exporter of wheat, as is Ukraine. It's up there in the top three. Corn you mentioned, but also other commodities like soybeans and sunflower oil. And not just Ukraine and Russia, but Kazakhstan and Romania, all big exporters of grains to the world that rely on these Black Sea ports to be able to do that. Any disruption...
Cheap, heavy commodities, sea is the best way to get them around, isn't it?
Absolutely. And any disruption of that is going to push the food prices around the world ever upwards at a time when there is real concern, understandably, because of the rising cost of fuel and food prices generally.
Great to talk to you. Mark White there, GB News Home Affairs and Securities Editor. As we like to say here on GB News, grown-up television. Let's bring in some of your views now on working from home. Gary says, I think working from home used to be a management privilege and it was very rarely done. Now it's been proved anyone can do it. I think it has put some people's noses out of joint, and this is why it's such a topic at the moment. Colleen emailed us to say, I'd like to know what happens to the London waiting element of salaries if people insist on working from home for the majority of their time. Very interesting point. London waiting, of course, that little extra bit you get on your pay to reflect the cost of living in the capital and the surrounding regions, for the most part being higher than elsewhere. Raymond contacted GB Views at gbnews.uk to say working from home has caused massive delays in productivity, and this issue won't be solved until everyone gets back to work like normal. Jean says, I'm really happy to be working from home as commuting to work is stressful, time-consuming, expensive and bad for the environment. Thanks as ever for your much-valued views. Keep emailing us, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, this is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, Wales eases COVID restrictions today as nightclubs reopen. Plus, today's Money Talks interview is with a man on a mission to improve Britain's economic partnerships with the Middle East. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
It's 1:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The Met Police has asked Sue Gray to make minimal reference to the events it's investigating. Her inquiry into alleged Downing Street parties during lockdown was due to be released this week. The force isn't calling for any further delays, but confirmed it's in contact with the Cabinet Office to avoid any prejudice in the investigation. The national insurance hike is going ahead, according to government ministers, despite reports the Prime Minister's considering a U-turn. Conservative MPs are among the voices calling for the increase in April to be scrapped as families struggle because of the rise in the cost of living. A senior civil servant has apologised for misleading MPs over the evacuation of animals in Afghanistan. Sir Philip Barton told the Foreign Affairs Committee that the Prime Minister's special representative for Afghanistan hadn't been told about the intervention. However, recent emails show Nigel Casey did ask Number 10 for guidance on what they wanted to be done with the Nowzad animal charity. Russia says it doesn't want war with Ukraine. The Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov confirmed proposals by the US to ease tensions are still being assessed. He expects to meet the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in the next couple of weeks. The Kremlin also says President Vladimir Putin will address Russia's security concerns during a phone call with the French president later today. The government has announced the UK's second antiviral tablet, known as Paxlovid, will be made available to thousands of people with weakened immune systems from mid-February. Studies suggest the drug made by Pfizer can cut the risk of hospital admission or death by 88% if given in the first 5 days of symptoms. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We're back at the top of the hour.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Well, today the Welsh Government completes the final stage of easing Plan B anti-COVID restrictions. Although masks will still be required in some settings in Wales, the majority of remaining rules have been lifted. Our Wales reporter Lily Hewitson joins us from Cardiff. Lily, happy days in Wales, or is there still lots of concern? What's the mood?
Yes, good afternoon, Liam. As of 6 o'clock this morning, the Welsh Government confirmed that Wales has gone into alert level 0. Now, this means a few things for people here in Wales. Firstly, that nightclubs can reopen. Now, I'm on Womanby Street in Cardiff. This is the hub of live music here in Cardiff. It's very quiet here at the moment, but preparations are starting to welcome back clubgoers. The clubs have been closed since the end of December, so it's the first time in a month that they're going to be reopened. Nightclubs were the only business that had to close down over that Christmas period because of the wave of Omicron here in Wales. So it's going to be really welcomed to have nightclubs open here once again. The move down to alert level 0 also means that the rule of 6 is going to be scrapped in hospitality venues across Wales. So that's pubs and restaurants. Of course, having that imposed over the Christmas period was particularly difficult for people in the industry here in Wales. So many Christmas parties and New Year's Eve parties were cancelled, so businesses here really lost out. So that's going to be scrapped from today, which is also good news. Working from home will also no longer be a legal requirement here in Wales. So the Welsh Government is still advising that people should work from home if they can, but it's no longer law that you have to work from home if possible. And finally, social distancing rules are going to be scrapped in the workplace here in Wales from today. So lots of changes coming into place. It really does feel like light at the end of the tunnel for people here in Wales, but things will be reviewed again on the 10th of February, where the Welsh Government will look at the COVID situation again, and will perhaps look into things like masks, as they are still mandatory here in Wales.
Very interesting, Lily, how the different constituent parts of the UK are gradually aligning themselves as, fingers and toes crossed, we finally put this pandemic behind us. And I know you've also been looking at a report that's been published this week by the Welsh Parliament into the HGV driver crisis, specifically in Wales. Obviously, Wales has ports facing the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, the Atlantic. HGV driver shortage will be felt quite severely in your part of the UK.
Yeah, that's right, Liam. Following the really worrying situation that we saw at the end of last year, you know, petrol stations closed across the UK and also some supermarket shelves being empty, the Welsh Parliament started this report and essentially are now calling upon the Welsh Government to make urgent improvements for HGV drivers here in Wales, following the impact that the shortage of drivers has had on the supply chain. Now, it's really hard to get drivers to come out and talk about, you know, their experience with life on the road. I've reached out to a lot of drivers across Wales, and they really don't want to put their story into the spotlight, as they're particularly worried about losing their jobs. But one driver that gave evidence to the committee who did this report said that they feel like, HGV drivers here in Wales feel like second-class citizens. Now, I had a chat to member of the Senedd, Paul Davis, about this report and their recommendations.
We saw some empty shelves in our shops. We saw some closed petrol stations. We saw some disrupted services. And behind these shortages are real people trying to keep our supply chains flowing. And that's why this report, I believe, is so important. And we came up with a number of recommendations to improve rest facilities for HGV drivers. We want to improve training courses for HGV drivers. And I hope very much that the Welsh Government now will accept these recommendations, take them on board, because I believe that it can make a difference in tackling some of the HGV shortages we've seen in recent years.
You've heard from people in the industry. What is the feeling out on the ground? People who actually work, you know, in this industry, who are driving these vans, how are they feeling? Because I've reached out to a couple of people who don't want to go on record and don't want to, you know, have a camera in their face and tell their story because they're afraid of losing their jobs. But from what they've told me, there's some really harrowing stories about what life is actually like out on the road, and how they're being treated.
Yes, absolutely. And we've heard those harrowing stories as well from HGV drivers. They don't feel valued at all. They sometimes feel that they are abused as they go about their work.
You've asked for the development of apprenticeship programs to help out with the issue. But persuading young people into a job, which is quite clearly not an enjoyable one, it must be a very, very difficult task.
Yes, and that's why our recommendations are so important, I believe, because we need to make sure that this career is valued for the future, and improving HGV drivers' experience and improving their conditions, making sure that they've got appropriate training programs in place, making sure we improve their rest stop facilities across the country will make a difference, and hopefully then will attract more young people into the profession.
So as Mr Davis said there's certainly a focus on improving rest facilities for HGV drivers and also training the next generation of drivers. And the committee told me, they're really confident that they can fix this problem, but for the drivers themselves, they need this fixed sooner rather than later.
Very nicely done. Thank you, Lily. Lily Hewitson there, GB News Welsh correspondent, reporting from Cardiff. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I'm talking to one of the UK's most prominent Iraqi-born entrepreneurs and philanthropists. Dr. Majid Al-Sadi has a PhD in engineering from Coventry University. He's the founder of the Centre for the New Midlands. That's a think tank with a vision for the West Midlands to have a new and unique trading relationship with Iraq and the broader Middle East. And here he is, our latest Money Talks, Dr. Majid Al-Sadi. Majid, if I may, great to have you in the studio. It's so interesting to talk to you. I've been following your work. What you believe in is that the UK has a unique opportunity to trade a lot more with the rest of the world, particularly the Middle East. There's obviously a very complex history between Britain and the Middle East, which we could discuss for the rest of the day. Absolutely. But you feel, don't you, there is still a sense of connection, goodwill, particularly in terms of business, and that the UK should be exploiting that by trading a lot more with a part of the world where there's a really fast-growing population and fast-growing economies.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liam. Actually, just to correct the information, I'm the president of the council, not the founder. The founder is a friend of mine, Mr. Chris Smith, who approached me in 2020, knowing my interest in the Midland area and my appreciation to the years I spent there. And I made my first business with a small grant from the government. It was Mrs. Thatcher then, and I started a small business which had grown up into a multi-million business then. I strongly believe the Midland area has a huge potential in terms of industry, skilled labour, knowledge, IT, automotive industry, defence, and also the labour there are less costly than having people to work in London. But it's been ignored, in my opinion, for so many years, and there's no much promotion to the British product, to investment opportunities in the area. And I think Britain, as you rightly said in your book, we're busy with Europe losing a lot of the market in the Middle East to others. Talking of being an Iraqi myself, and I've been visiting Iraq regularly, you see a Chinese product, you see a Turkish, French, German, Russian, everybody. But you hardly, British. There isn't. And
in terms of tangible products, there might be financial services, legal services, defence services,
maybe,
defence,
exactly,
consumer goods, customer-facing industries.
Absolutely. And I think even with a major contracts in defence, in oil, we had President Macron 3 weeks ago came to Baghdad and signed $30 billion contract for Total to build a refinery.
French car makers are making hay, aren't they, making cars in the Middle East?
Absolutely. Talking about cars, I mean, Iraq traditionally, the first country to have a double-decker Leyland in the 1940s. And people still have a fond memory of those. Now we have Chinese buses, which they've fallen apart after 2 years. Why? Petrochemical industries, water treatment, energy, cars. You hardly see any British cars in the streets. And that's the question. Where are the Brits? Where's the government who helped so much in removing Saddam Hussein in 2003, spending so much money, taxpayers' money, losing so many good lives, soldiers there. But when this over, they don't have any involvement in the business and trade, the commercial part
opportunities that have been created. I must admit, Majid, I've been a little bit selfish in asking you on because I too have a big interest in the West Midlands. Obviously, I'm not from the West Midlands, you can tell from my accent, though I did spend many happy years at Warwick University, and I'm still on the board of the economics department there. I know from spending time in the West Midlands, the quality of the industry that goes on there, the powerhouse it is, and the potential. And also, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East seeing the business opportunities. So what do we need to do here in the UK to really build on those cultural links? Obviously, there's an Iraqi diaspora here in the UK, an Egyptian diaspora, almost every country in the Middle East, every major economy, there's a community here, not just in London, but across the UK, as your experience shows, given your closeness to the West Midlands. What do we have to do to take this up to the next level? Do you think there's some kind of guilt here in the UK that it feels like colonialism to be doing business in countries with which we have a complex relationship? Is there something we need to get over here?
But I don't think it's guilt. The Brits have an excellent relationship with the Middle East, the Gulf states. You'll see a lot of products there, a lot of big contracts awarded to British companies, but not in Iraq. And this is my main area. This is my focus. I think in the Midland Council, which we established, we have a three mission. The first one is to encourage the government as a think tank, giving them ideas how to support the Midland area, divert some money into their investment into housing, infrastructure, also incentivize the new startups, which will help unemployment quite dramatically.
Jobs and growth.
Exactly.
And tax revenue, by the way.
Absolutely. Secondly is to promote the products which is manufactured in the Midlands through subsidies. The Saudis, and upon my advice years ago, they subsidize their products which made in Saudi, which is very expensive and a high quality. They couldn't sell in the Iraqi market by allocating $1.5 billion into subsidizing products going to the Iraqi market. And I think the British government could do that in order to open the market for a British product. And the third mission is to get investment, a foreign investment, into the Midlands area. I was in Birmingham yesterday and Coventry, and there is a huge potential with return on investment reaches 10%, and that does not exist anywhere in the world. So we need the government to join us as a private sector in getting these jobs done. I'm organizing a delegation in 3-4 months' time, once the Iraqi government, the new Iraqi government, and the delegation will consist of academics from the universities in the Midland, manufacturers of all kinds, business people, MPs, the mayor of the Midland, Mr. Andy Street, he promised to come, and government ministers probably, and visit Jordan and Iraq, and promoting truly the British product and insist of the importance of getting these products into the shelves and to use it to the people with subsidy from the government.
Now, often, I mean, I come from an immigrant background myself. I come from an Irish background. You know, my people have come here since the 1930s, 40s, 50s. I think sometimes immigrant communities are in a better position to see what needs to be done in a country. They're often at the cutting edge of creating new businesses because they've got that kind of urgency to create something to justify the upheaval that they've endured. So with the eyes of somebody who loves the UK, and I know you do, a sort of grateful outsider who's now obviously your home is here, and we're lucky to have you. What do you think needs to happen in the West Midlands to really make this part of the country fulfil its potential, or at least get closer to what it can do and should be doing?
And to meet its potential. It's a huge potential for it, and particularly it's Birmingham with the new train system they're applying. I think it's so closer to London now with minutes of getting there. So a lot of people will be living in the Midland area, and up in Birmingham, in Coventry, and the areas of Warwick, and so a lot of investments need to go there in terms of housing, infrastructure, commercial. If the government encouraging new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new investors to come from the Middle East, and I'm chairing quite a few investments association, if the government encourage new inv in the Middle East, and by incentivize them through loans, low-interest loans, through tax reliefs, through they will, you know, there's a lot of them will be coming here for 5% return, not 10% return, which we...
What about the labour force, skills, apprenticeships, training? Can you and your business colleagues hire the people that you need in the West Midlands?
Yes.
Are the skills there? Are the attitudes right? Do people want to go to work and improve their lot?
They do, actually. We have quite a few investments there, and we found a very skilled labour at a very reasonable price. It's different from London.
A lot cheaper than London, right?
A lot cheaper than London. And people want to work, they want to improve the situation. They stuck there for tens of years. You know, some people I know back in the 80s, they're still in Birmingham and in Coventry. They haven't seen the rest of the world. And the depression came with the emotional depression, if you like, with the
As
pandemic.
Industry wound down, car making in the area wound
Absolutely.
down. It's starting to recover, though.
Yeah,
It's
starting to recover. There's a lot of foreign investment in electric cars, for example.
Sure.
In Coventry, the Tata, the Nissan are doing
So you've got Japan there, India.
Exactly. So we need to see more people coming in, invest more there by incentivize them through tax reliefs and what have you. The government has to play a role. I think it's very important that government, private sector have to form this new system to encourage investment.
There's a lot of talk about the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands engine. Finally, Dr. Al-Sadi, mark out of 10. How do you think we're doing in making those two concepts a reality?
Not in the Midlands, but I would say it's good. There's a lot of money went into the northeast and northwest and the south, but not a lot in the Midlands. I would like to see some more money.
We'll stay in touch and we'll return to this important subject. Great to see you in the studio. That's my latest Money Talks guest, Dr. Majid Al-Sadi, entrepreneur, philanthropist and president of the Centre for the New Midlands. There are similar conversations with players from the world of business, finance and politics. Dozens of extended Money Talks interviews now on my Money Talks podcast, on the GB News YouTube channel or via the GB News app. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me here on The Money. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. on Monday. Have a great weekend. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan and that was On The Money.
Hello again. It's been a pretty quiet January so far, but our weather is set to turn more unsettled as we head through this weekend. Through Friday, still got some sunshine around, but those skies clouding over and those winds turning stronger. And that's because this high pressure slides away and we see these tightening isobars starting to push their way in. So a wetter and windier picture of weather to come as we go through the next couple of days. Out there at the moment, though, we've got plenty of sunshine across eastern areas. The sky is turning a little bit hazy through the afternoon as we see that cloud pushing in from the west. But elsewhere, rather cloudy through much of the afternoon with some outbreaks of rain pushing in across the west of Scotland. The wind's beginning to pick up here, and that's a sign of things to come. Temperatures on the mild side, though, 11s and 12s under the cloud, 9 or 10 where we've got sunnier skies and some sunshine around through much of the day. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, skies turn cloudy for most places, some drizzly bits of pieces of rain in western areas, but that wet weather and windier weather becomes more dominant across Scotland. So we are going to see some pretty gusty conditions, a wind warning in force across Scotland. We'll see some pretty squally gales to push their way through with that heavy rain, but it does stay mild overnight. As we go into Saturday then, that's when the winds really start to ramp up. We'll see some very gusty conditions for western Scotland through the central belt over towards eastern Scotland as well. Could be some damaging gusts of winds here. Stay tuned to the latest forecast. This weather front drives its way southwards. We'll see brighter and blustery conditions following in behind some wintry showers over higher ground and feeling quite cool with those strong and gusty winds, even though temperatures may get to 13 across the far south. That cloud and rain eventually clears the far southwest of Cornwall as we go through the early hours, and then clearer skies following on behind means that as those winds ease, we will see a touch of frost into Sunday. But the weather is set to turn yet more unsettled again on Sunday with another deep area of low pressure pushing in. Bye-bye for now.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at 8 o'clock on Fridays and again at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and